The History Things podcast is brought to you by TR Historical, your one-stop shop for all your historical fan gear needs. Visit trhistorical.com and use the promo code HistoryThings to receive 10% off your next purchase. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the show.
Are you ready?
Welcome back to the History Things podcast field video exclusive brought to you by TR Historical, your one-stop shop for all your history, nerdy, historical fan gear needs. Special guest Avery Lentz with us again here. We made it across, he's from the Battles of Banter podcast, by the way, make sure you check them out. We made it across the Rappahannock here. As you can see, Chatham Manor, where we just were, is up in the distance on the ridge. We had just left you with the story of the engineers beginning to cross this river here, specifically where we are, the 50th New York Engineers. Now, they're going to be out here establishing one of the first major bridgeheads under fire. Avery and I always like to have a good back and forth, a banter, you could say, because in my opinion, in 1861, some Union forces under Stringham from the Navy and I think it was Butterfield, and the Army, they land on Hatteras Beach under fire.
Artillery fire.
Artillery fire. I think
that is where I saved myself.
This is where Avery and I agree that the small arms fire that the engineers are taking here is the big separating factor, and thus we will go with it. This is one of the first beachheads really established in U.S. Military history here. So let's just take a quick look at where we are on the map. I'm going to get a little closer just to show you sort of, if you were at home looking at a Battle of Fredericksburg map, just to sort of see where we're at. We're up here right around where Sumner's guys are at here in the top of the city. So we're going to talk about the river crossing, and at the end of this, we're going to kind of set up for the street fighting to come. So we're going to take it away here just with a little bit about some of the units that cross these ridges here. Matt has a home state unit here he'll tell us about. So there were 4 regiments, I believe, but we're going to focus on 2 of them.
Yep, we're going to focus on specifically starting off with one of my home state regiments, the 7th Michigan Infantry. The 7th Michigan is going to be piling into these pontoon boats and moving across the Rappahannock River behind me. Now, Avery, these are not aerodynamic boats. These aren't even really meant to be doing what they're doing.
Not at all. They have no oars. They don't have any streamlined hulls. They are flat-bottom boats.
And they're just pulling them across?
Yeah, I mean, they are rowing.
Okay.
But they are going sideways, crisscrossing. They're having a very difficult time staying straight. Not to mention, even though the current has calmed, there's still a heavy current. So you're trying to stay in line with where you want to land. And it doesn't, if you look back at it, I'm still trying to realize. If you look back at the river, it doesn't seem like that's that far of a distance. But imagine going across in a boat that literally the instant it hits the water, it goes sideways. It goes in opposite direction that you want it to go in.
While under fire.
While under fire.
Yep.
And I mean, the volume of fire from the Mississippians, they've had time to stack and load muskets. They have everything ready to keep up a constant barrage of musketry pretty much at this precise spot. And so it is a concentrated fire. You might be thinking, if it's muzzle-loading muskets, how heavy can that fire be? But these men have stockpiled, and they have precisely concentrated their infantry fire to bracket the entire area of river behind us here.
So we've got Mississippians behind you in the houses. This is a fairly residential area up here at the uppermost crossing. We do have some of Lane's Floridians a little bit further to the north. We're going to talk about them in a moment. But these Michigan boys, they're going to pile into the boats and begin to move their way across the Rappahannock behind me. We've got about 135 men in 6 boats moving their way across the Rappahannock. They are going to succeed in crossing at around 3:30 in the afternoon and begin to deploy here on the banks on the Confederate side of the Rappahannock and begin pushing up into these Mississippi troops.
We're talking hours after some of the other crossings have been established, sometime around like 11
Yeah,
or
exactly.
even noon, things like that. So you can see when I said like this was a much tougher, a more daunting task. It's because Barksdale's concentration and things like that.
In the 89th New York of Rush Hawkins' brigade of George Getty's division of Orlando Wilcox's 9th Corps has the same job, just not even like 500 yards downstream at Middle Crossing. Now they're landing in a more industrial area.
Right.
They're at the wharfs. They're at the Sophia docks. And one thing that's really interesting about the Rappahannock River is that it is a tidal river. Depending on the time of day, it can be very deep or it can be very shallow. In the time of the Revolution, in the pre-colonial days, you would have seen masted ships actually coming upriver, this far upriver,
Wow.
coming from the bay. So they had dropped off their loads at the wharfs at the Sophia docks. So there's a lot more warehouses, there's brickyards over there. And most of this, as at the time of these crossings, have been decimated by the shelling. So you have a lot of rubble, got a lot of different bottlenecks in the streets, and the Confederates will be utilizing, like Matt had said earlier, will be utilizing this cover as the Union forces are crossing under fire. So it's a pretty substantial, if you want to look at beachhead defenses, it's pretty substantial here.
It's a significant operation, and in fact, they're going to begin taking casualties almost immediately. The brigade commander, for which the 7th Michigan is a part of, he is going to be wounded, badly wounded. Baxter, isn't it?
Henry Baxter.
Henry Baxter is the former colonel of the 7th Michigan. He's been bumped up to brigade command. He'll be badly wounded, and when his soldiers, the 7th Michigan, get over to this side of the river, they begin to push these Mississippians back, and they're told by their lieutenant colonel to give no quarter to these Mississippi defenders.
I love pirates, just so this order makes me feel so good.
What's interesting about this is that one of these guys would actually later write that for humanity's sake, the order for the most part was ignored. But it's not entirely ignored. Avery, you've got a great quote from Henry Hunt, of all people, talking about the clearing of these buildings and what's going to happen.
So it's not a direct quote, but Henry Hunt can recall the fighting that's happening. He's watching from up on the hill on behind us there, where Chatham Manor is, and he's actually watching the street fighting beginning on Sophia here, and he could judge the progress that Union soldiers are making when they enter a house by the amount of screams coming from each floor. Because at this point, Confederates, if they're still in the houses, they're trapped, they're boxed in.
Right.
And if the order to give no quarter is truly given, then yeah, those screams are final death throes.
Brutal.
And it's a very brutal episode of a battle that you would think, you know, during the Civil War, there was at least, I don't know, rules and camaraderie.
It's one of the last romantic wars where there's some alleged civility amongst your
Not on
enemies.
December 11th, for sure. This is a very volatile battle. There's going to be a lot of emotions. And for the Union forces in this area who've been dealing with this all day, this delay, they're going to be taking out their aggressions and frustrations on any defender they come across. And, as we see later, the city of Fredericksburg itself.
Now, the street fighting we're going to be talking about in a moment is going to be over fairly quickly, within about 45 minutes to an hour. But it's not going to be just the New York troops and the Michigan troops. They're going to be supported by 2 Massachusetts regiments as well, the 19th and the 20th, who are actually going to land right in this vicinity as well. In fact, the 7th Michigan comments about after clearing the initial houses to form the beachhead, they will actually wait until the bridge is completed and the 19th and 20th Mass can come over and join them, at which point they begin pushing as a concentrated mass into the streets of Fredericksburg. Now, off to the north, we've mentioned those Floridians as well, Lane's brigade. They've actually already begun to break off at this point because of the savaging by these Michigan soldiers, but also because of Henry Hunt's artillery. Those Floridians, they're not hunkered down like these Mississippi troops are
No,
they?
they're pretty much out in the open. They're in the streets themselves. There's no real reason why they did this. It wasn't anyone's fault, really. It's just the fact that this is pretty much the limits. This is the end of Sophia Street. This is the end of the town limits. So it's much more open ground in the area beyond the cameras there. And so the Floridians are caught in this barrage. And pretty much, if you're a Union gunner who's been trying to shell out Confederates all day, any Confederate in the open, ooh, that's a nice target. So these guys do get mauled up pretty badly. And as Matt had said, when the 19th and 20th come up, any Confederate in the area here, they're going to start to have to fall back because they're going to find themselves outnumbered in at least 2 to 1 here.
Remember, the armies here are sort of massively dispositioned. You have a large number of federal troops on this side of the Rappahannock, you have the bulk of the Army of Northern Virginia arrayed in this massive line, kind of like, what did we describe in the podcast episode? Kind of like if you were to take a book and kind of hold it up like this, right, with Lee in the center. The Confederates have a very sort of strong position between Marie's Heights and Prospect Hill.
That is correct.
And then down here in the town, you have a small number of defenders, and just, you know, the Mississippians. And so once the Union Army is able to establish a foothold here on this side of the river, Barksdale, like Avery was saying, knows it's time to go because you're going to get overwhelmed.
And the interesting thing about that is Robert E. Lee had never intended for Barksdale to defend the town as long as he did.
Right. Yeah.
The orders were, as soon as the Union get a foothold here on the western bank, fall back, get out of the town completely. But Barksdale decides in that 45 minutes, he will do a fighting withdrawal. He will make the Union forces pay for every street they advance over. And to have that job, to be outnumbered, it's a very, very difficult job, especially in a street fight. How do you fall back? How do you successfully withdraw in an urban battle when that's not doctrinated?
Especially in a city that has just been destroyed by artillery.
Rubble is blocking streets. There's roadblocks.
Absolutely.
There's smoke. That's the thing. Visibility is limited because of the amount of dust and smoke in the air. And that kind of environment creates a lot of chaotic situations for both sides.
So before we get up there, you might have noticed, with the very keen eyes that you all have out there, that some of us have started to shed some clothing. Because we're living in a very typical mid-Atlantic day, and much like the soldiers themselves would have lived through in 1862. You see a lot of depictions of these guys, I mean, even right here, where they're wearing their winter greatcoats. Because you're thinking December and snow and the holidays and all that stuff. And that's true before the sun really comes up and right as the sun really goes down. But in December, in the mid-Atlantic, it can be a midsummer day, as it is right now. When we started filming, we were all bundled up, scarves, jackets, wool coats, hoodies, all that stuff. And I think it's like 25 degrees warmer than it was when we started filming now. We're probably near 60 degrees at this point, which was kind of a real-time temperature for what the soldiers were fighting in 1862.
And it's important to remember because the ground had been frozen because of the lower temperatures. But I know. Gosh, you stop saying frozen. The point is that once the sun rises, that ground is going to begin to thaw. And when you have all these people marching over that same ground, it's going to create very muddy conditions. And what happens if you step in a lot of mud, you slip and you tumble. It creates a very tough terrain to advance over. So that's something to keep in mind as we go forward, as we talk about the fighting here and some of the actual terrain difficulties that will be faced, not just for the defenders, but primarily for the attackers as well.
All right, now for logistical purposes, we're going to ask you just to kind of hang on. We're going to cut the feed for a minute. We're going to get ourselves back up the hill here, just to the initial phases of the street fighting itself. And then what we're going to do is kind of we're going to attempt some craziness. We're going to do like a moving shot as we walk sort of up a couple of the blocks that the Union troops, specifically the Massachusetts guys and the Michigan guys, had to kind of fight their way through. We'll stop at a place called Michigan Alley, and we'll throw a little shout out to Matt there because, you know, he loves all things Michigan, except I'm a Rangers fan, so let's end that banter right there. But we'll see you guys in about 2-3 minutes. Just kind of hang tight. We're going to go live in a moment.